Hi everyone, thanks for joining me. This is a very beginner basics 101 video tutorial on how to use machine embroidery. It's very hard to do tutorials on embroidery because everybody's machine is different. But I wanted to show you some of the things that I didn't know when I first started out in embroidery: how to hoop your design, when to hoop your design, how to get your design where you want it. These are all very basic things that the tutorials I was watching kind of left out and assumed I already knew that. So I'm going to, the first half of the video, I'm just going to show you where to get started. And in the second half of the video, if you want to watch that, I talk more about what kind of machine to buy, what to buy to get started, and more of a Q&A type second half of the video where I just go into some of the details and what I recommend. So the first thing I'm going to tell you is if you're brand new to embroidery, start with scrap fabric. Just get to know your machine, get to know how it works. Don't put a shirt on right away. Don't put a towel on right away. The first thing we're going to do in the video is I'm just going to show you the very basic how to get your design where you want it to be on your project. And we're just going to do that on a piece of scrap fabric just to get you familiar with hooping, to get you familiar with your machine, and to get you familiar with the very basic how to go from hooping to the machine to pressing the start button. So that we're going to do that first, and then I'm going to walk you through how to make this makeup towel, which is super easy. I use these all the time. These are, excuse the lint that's sitting on my desk. These are black makeup towels, so it's really nice when after you wash your face so you don't get mascara and stain up your good towels. We keep makeup towels. All my girls use them. So I'm going to show you how I made this, and then I also made a beach towel, and I'll kind of go through that really quickly. But again, this is a very basics 101. If you're a seasoned embroiderer, you probably aren't even going to be interested in this video. And if you're brand new, again, the first half's going to be showing you how to get it centered and lined up and go from the hoop to the machine. And the second half, I go through what I recommend to get started, what I recommend as far as machines, and all of that information. So let's get started. So now we're going to talk about what do I need to get started with embroidery. There's very few things that you actually need to get started with embroidery. Now there are a lot of things you could get, and there's some videos that I watched told me, well, you need this, you need this, you need this, and honestly I've never used half of those things. So I'm telling you the bare basics that you need to get started. And again, I'm encouraging you to practice. Use practice fabrics, and to start out, not with a shirt, not with any specialty items, just practice on some fabric. So in order to do that, you're going to need tearaway stabilizer. This is a staple to any embroidery projects that you're going to do. You're going to probably use some tearaway stabilizer on, I don't know, the majority of your projects, if not all. I pretty much use tearaway stabilizer on just about everything. As you get more comfortable with embroidery and you just say, okay, I want to do a shirt, I want to do a towel, you're going to have to look into that, and there might be some additional stabilizers that you want to add, because that's something that you're going to do and it's going to help your project turn out better. But to get started, start with some tearaway stabilizer. I buy it by the roll. It also comes in sheets. I'll link everything that I can find in the description below the video, but you're going to want some tearaway stabilizer. You're going to need your hoops. You're going to need your scissors. Now, this is the pair of scissors that I most often use. These are handy because when you have a project in your hoop and the bend in them, if I hold it this way you can see, makes it easy so that you're not fighting with this hoop with a flat, straight pair of scissors trying to cut threads or trying to cut fabric or whatever you need to cut. It has this bend in it, so it makes it easier to get in there. There's also this style of a scissor, and some people like these. This one also has a bend. These also come in straight, but this has it's a kind of a protective edge, and this keeps you from cutting the part of the fabric that you don't want to cut. So I pretty much use this pair all the time. You don't need both to start out. Just get you a pair of plain, or at least sharp scissors. It doesn't even have to be these. You can just have sharp fabric scissors to start out, but I recommend these. The other thing I use a lot is a 505 temporary adhesive, and this is for if you want to float your project, and that means you're not actually putting it in the hoop, you're just putting it on top, and I'll show you that when we do the towel project. So in order to do what we're going to do, you're going to need tearaway, you're going to need some temporary adhesive, you're going to need your scissors and your hoops. And then this is what we're going to be making. I make these a lot. These are makeup towels, and I buy these black towels, and I'll link them in the description below the video. But they have this band right here, this decorative band that many towels have. Let me see if I can get the light to catch it. There. So this is not a plush. We're not sewing on the towel part. So we're not going to need to put anything else on there. If we were going to do a towel, like the beach towels that I just posted the other day, and you wanted to do this style and you're embroidering on top of the pile of the towel, then you're going to need water-soluble stabilizer. And that looks like this, and it just disappears in the, when it gets wet, it just dissolves. So if you want to practice or do, maybe if you have an extra towel laying around and you want to practice on this, then you're going to need the water-soluble stabilizer for this particular project or any project that has like a pile to it. You're going to need a pen or some kind of something to mark with. And beyond that, I think we're ready to get started. So what I have done is I've already created my design. I'm not going to get into how to insert fonts on my machine or the technicality of my specific machine. This is why I've been hesitant to do an embroidery video, because everybody has a different embroidery machine and everything's a little bit different. But I'm going to show you all of the basic features, and I'm going to assume that you have already either bought an embroidery file and you're using that, or you put the letters in on your machine. However your machine does that, you'll have to read your manual, and you've already got the file set up in the machine. So without further ado, let me flip the camera around. I'm going to show you how to get the frame ready for what we're going to do, and I'm also going to show you how to get the frame ready if you just want to practice on a piece of fabric. So let me switch things around and I'll be right back. Okay, so I have my frame, I have my stencil. Most hoops are going to come with the stencil, which fits right inside, and that just helps you find the center point. If you didn't get one of those, don't stress, you'll be fine. You're going to cut a piece of stabilizer that is a little bit bigger than your frame on all sides. Don't use your good scissors to do that. You can either tear it or cut it with some plain scissors. And then you're going to need a ruler. So for practice, we're going to hoop our fabric, which means we're going to put the fabric inside the hoop. So the first thing you're going to do is take the bottom part, and that's the part that hooks onto your machine. And I have mine oriented the way it's going in the machine. And my machine, it hooks on this side. A lot of machines, it hooks on this side. So for me, it helps to orient it the way it's going into the machine so that I can just keep everything in my mind the right way. So I've got my stabilizer, and I'm just going to, this is just a spare piece that I had that I didn't end up using, so it's been hooped before. But yours is just going to be nice and flat. Then you're going to take your fabric, and this is just a scrap piece of fabric, just a piece of muslin to practice on. And you're going to put that in your hoop. You're going to turn the knob on your hoop to loosen it. You're going to need to loosen it in order to get this fabric in. All right, so once you have that done, you're just going to place your hoop inside, and I like to push down in one corner and then go to the opposite corner and kind of push down. And you're trying to keep this fabric and your stabilizer taut. I'm going to go to the other corner, push down. And I'm kind of pulling my fabrics. I haven't tightened my hoop yet, but be very careful because it'll rip. And then you want to make sure that it's down on all four sides, all the way down in your frame, and then tighten your frame up. So I'm just going to tighten this back up. Now this is something that I never saw anybody tell you in the videos, but the very first time I did this to practice, in the middle of my embroidery, my frame popped open and I lost my placement. the whole project came out of the frame and there was no way to line it up. I like to use these binder clips. Now my Janome actually comes with its own clips, but I find these work just as well, and I just prefer to use those most of the time. So I just put these clips over, and that is just going to ensure that my frame is not going to pop open and lose my project halfway through. Now make sure if you have excess fabric that if you put the clip on, that it's not going under here where you might be embroidering. So I'm just going to kind of just roll it this way and clip it into place. So I feel good about that. My machine or my embroidery fabric is in place. I have my stabilizer in place. If you do this, it should kind of make that sound. It should sound like a drum. If it doesn't, it's too loose and you need to tighten up your fabric and your stabilizer a little bit. So the next thing I'm going to do is take my template, and this is another part that I never saw in a video when I started, was how do you line this up? So I'm going to take my template and I'm going to take, this is just a Pilot friction pen. This erases with an iron. So it's not going to be permanent if it happens to show through. And I'm just going to mark right in the center where that dot is. There's a cutout in my template, and that shows me the center of my hoop right there. If you don't have a template, usually there are marks right here and right here and right here and right here on your hoop, and you can simply line this up and create a crosshair. And I'm just lining up those marks on my hoop, and you can see that's right in line with that dot that I made. So for just our scrap project, I'm just going to use one of the onboard designs on my machine. So we're going to go over there. So now we're going to take it over to the machine, and I'm going to show you how you use this to line it up. That's the part that was missing the first time that I went to embroider, is that I never saw anybody show you how do you line this up where you want it to be. So we're just going to assume, we're just using scrap fabric, but let's just say this is our shirt and we've got it lined up, and we're going to make it so that our pocket design is centered right over this frame, right over this dot. So if I was going to do my name right here, I would try to line it up so that wherever I wanted my name to be on my shirt, the center of it was right here. And I would do that by taking my shirt and saying, okay, I want my design to be right here on my shirt, and I'm going to fold it in half. That's my center point. And I would match that center point up right there, and then I would hoop the fabric. So does that make sense? It'll make sense when we do the towel. But for right now, we're just practicing, and we're trying to get a design right in the center of our fabric. So let me go over to the machine, and I'm going to show you how to do that part. Okay, so here I am over at my machine. This is the Janome Memorycraft 500E, and I have put a design on my machine right here, and when I inserted this into the machine, it automatically puts it right in the center of my design. If yours for some reason does not, there is usually a onboard command within your menu to center it, and it will put it right in the middle. The middle of this screen, right where those crosshairs are, represents the middle of my fabric, right where that is. Now, I put my hoop on and I set it to the home position. And again, you're going to have to refer to your machine to figure out how to do that. I can't show you on this one, and it's going to pertain to each machine. But for me, I can simply just put it in and push the home button, and it goes right where it needs to go. So it's right in the center of my design. Now, once in a while, this is going to be off. It'll be, a few marks to the right or to the left. Mine happens to be right on this time. But if it was off, what I would do is I would put it down, drop my needle, or drop the presser foot, put my needle down, lift it up, and see if my needle is right in that dot. And I don't know if you can see that. Let me see if I can zoom you in. but my needle is right where that dot was. So it's right where it needs to be. But if it wasn't, I would just lift it back up and I would use the controls. I could zoom back out. I would use the controls on my machine to move it. So I would go into, so if it wasn't centered correctly, I could go into my machine and click the appropriate buttons and I could move the hoop just a little bit. It only lets you move it, I think 7 millimeters up or down, but it is right where I want it. It's right in the center, so I don't need to make any adjustments. So all I have to do at this point, I now have it centered on here. It's centered on here. So it's going to put that design right where I want it. So all I have to do is put my presser foot down, and this machine tells you if you forget, put the presser foot down, hit the start button, and it's going to stitch out that design. Now once it starts stitching, I usually immediately stop it, take my scissors and trim off this tail so that that doesn't get stitched into it, and then restart it. Now my machine automatically cuts the threads when it stops and starts. Not all machines will do that. Some machines you may have to go in there with scissors and cut the stitches from one section to the other. So now you can see it has stitched the design right in the middle of the fabric, right where we put that spot. So that's how I would practice. That's going to show you how to line things up. If I wanted to, say I wanted to do another practice and try to put something down here, all I would do is, let me back out. And I'm just using the onboard designs. So I would go back into home and go back into the library, and I could pick out, say I wanted to put a flower down on the corner. So I would grab my flower, okay, and it's going to automatically put it right in the center. So in my machine in particular, I have to go back home. I now have this flower, so I could put this flower down here, and then I could stitch that flower, and that's going to go down here. We know the butterfly is right here in the center. So again, that's all there is to lining that up. Now let's line up an actual project and create the makeup towel, and I'm going to show you how I would do that. And we're going to float the fabric, which is a little bit different technique. Okay, so we're back over here at our hoop, and we're going to do the makeup towel like this on our black blanks. So what you're going to do, you're going to start with your tearaway, and again, I'm just going to grab a piece of this. I have this rotary cutter that I use for paper only, and I find that's really helpful. All right, we're going to place our tearaway on top of our hoop. We're not going to put the towel in the hoop. We're going to do what they call floating. So I'm going to go ahead and hoop the tearaway only. Again, make sure you keep that nice and taut. Make sure that it's all the way down. All right, once you have it, your tearaway hooped, check for the drum test. Yes, it's nice and taut, looks good. So I'm gonna put my clips back on. All right, so we've got that done. Now what I'm going to do is, using my center marks, I am lining that up, my ruler up with this mark and making a mark right down the center. I'm gonna do the same thing this way. And you can use a regular pen. This is never going to show. So I've got my crosshair this way and this way. So this is where I'm going to use the 505 spray. We're going to do what's called floating. And that means we're going to put the towel on top of the project, on top of the tearaway, instead of hooping it in the hoop. I find when I do towels, if I put it in the hoop, it's more likely to pop open and move. So this makes it really easy. So use this 505 spray if you have it. If you don't have it, you can just pin the towel down to the stabilizer. I like to use this. It makes it really quick and easy. I spray this over a trash can. You shouldn't spray it anywhere near your machine, and you really shouldn't spray it around your cutting mat, but I'm just going to show you so that you can see what I do. But just a quick spray on top of it. Not a ton, just a little bit. It's a temporary adhesive. And again, I recommend you spray it over the trash can. So when I'm doing a towel, what I like to do is put the bulk of the towel on the opposite side of where it attaches to my machine. So again, some people's machines, a lot of them hook on this side. Mine happens to hook on this side. So I'm going to keep the bulk of the towel out here. And again, we're shooting for the band of this towel that's not nappy. So I have my towel laid out. This is the back of the towel. You can see the tags here. So I'm going to fold it in half so that I'm looking at the back, just like this. And that's going to establish my center point. So now what I'm going to do is line up my target area, which is this band right here, right on the center this way and the center that way. So I'm lining this up, and then I'm going to lay it down, and I'm going to keep looking up back here to make sure that I'm following that center line with the center of my stripe. Perfect. So we're still looking at, pull it back here, we're still looking at the wrong side. So then I'm going to open it up and just lay this side down so that that center is following. And that honestly is all you need to do. So again, this is for a towel that we're embroidering on that doesn't have any nap. If you were going to do this way, you would do the exact same thing. This is where you embroider on the nap. And it's a separate video. And like I said, as you get into specialty things, you're going to want to do a little research on what you need. But if we were going to do it this way, I'll just tell you quickly, I would do this part the exact same way. I would line up right where I want the name, right with the center point. And then I would add a layer of this right on top, which is my water soluble stabilizer. And then I would pin it down. But every step up till right here would be exactly the same to do this. The only difference is you need to add a layer of water soluble stabilizer if you're going to embroider where the nap of the towel is. Okay, so if I were going to put this down, I would use some pins. These are what I like to use. These are actually quilters safety pins. You can see they have a bend in them, and it makes it really easy to be able to just pin this down like this. You just have to be very careful that they don't get in the way of your embroidery. So I babysit my machine, and I often will stop it or move them or hold them down so that they stay out of the way. Or you could just use a regular straight pin. Just make sure you're pinning where the fabric is not. So you would put that down. Since we're doing it on the part of the towel that is not nappy, we don't need to add that additional layer. So we're just making the makeup towel, and we're putting it right in the center of this band. So that's all I would do at this point. If it makes you feel better, you can go ahead and pin your fabric down as well. So now we're going to take this back over to the machine, and I'm going to show you what happens over there. Okay, so we're back over at the machine. I've got my hoop on. You can see I have my towel, so the bulk of the towel is out of my way. Again, some people have this bar on this side, so you would want the bulk of the towel over here out of your way. You want to make sure that the sides are not going to get scooped up under the hoop. So I will be watching that. But again, I just put my design on the screen, so it's right centered where it's supposed to be. I can double check that just by going over here and telling it to center. So it's centered the way it should be. I'm not really concerned about it being in a specific dot. I've already put my towel so that it's centered right where it needs to be. So the next thing I need to do is, if you notice, this makeup is going to go in this direction. It's horizontal, so it's going to print it out this way. I need it to print it out that way. So I need to go into my machine on board, and again, yours will have this feature. You have to find where your particular buttons are, but I click this and then I can rotate it 45, but it's still right in the center. So right now it's going to print out this way, and that's exactly what I want. So whatever you're looking at on the screen is what's going to happen over here. So you want to make sure that you do that rotation. So you're going to hit OK. And then most machines have what's called an air trace. And when I'm trying to fit something very specific in a very specific area, a smaller area, I want to do this air trace just to make sure that it's going to kind of go where I think it's going to go. So what I'm going to do is click this button, and I'm just going to click this button, and I'm watching it to see it's outlining where the design's going to be. And I can make any adjustments that I need to if I want to move it up or down or sideways or whatever I need to do at that point. But that looked pretty good. So I'm just going to let it go. And then we're going to put our presser foot down. I'm going to keep my thread out of my way. Hit start. Oh, it's going into the nap a little bit. I'm going to let it start. I'm going to stop it, and I'm going to cut my tail. So I should have maybe moved that up just a little bit. It's hard to tell from the angle I'm at with the camera for the air trace, but you'll watch it and see that it's pretty close. So I'm just gonna hit start. So here's our finished makeup towel, and you can see it is perfectly right in the center of the towel, right where we wanted it. And all that you do is, again, pull this out. It just tears away. That sticky isn't so sticky that it's going to snag your towel. Set your frame aside. And then it looks like that. It's right in the center. So then on the back, you just go in and you tear away the center stabilizer. Some people like to do sticky stabilizer with towels, and some people like to do cutaway. I just think this makes the nicest look, and these are actually going to be used. This isn't just a decorative towel. So I just use the tearaway. And I like these black makeup towels. They make great gifts for my daughters and my daughter-in-law. And we just use them so that you don't mess up your good towels when you're drying your face after you wash your face and you got makeup stains. Any little pieces of stabilizer that's in there will come out at the first wash. And if you have any tie-offs, you can trim those up. And I used white bobbin thread. You could use the color so that it blends a little bit differently, or you could use black. I usually keep white in mine, unless it's something that I know the back's going to be seen a lot. But that's it. That's how I make the makeup towels. You can see it's perfectly centered. Just do that. So if I fold this in half, put my finger right where the center point is, you can see it is perfectly centered. That's how you line things up. Now again, if you want to do the beach towel method and you don't have a band where it doesn't have the plush part on it, like with this, then you need to do one additional step, and you're going to pin this down, and it just needs to be as big as your name. I would probably cut a piece about that big, and then I would pin it into place over the top. And then do the exact same thing. You want to make sure that you orient your design correctly so that it's going to go in the right direction. Ask me how I know. Evie's towel actually has a name on both ends because I forgot to flip it. And on this end, it's going this way. And on this end, it's going the right way. But Evie won't mind. So that's how you do the basics. I hope that this was helpful. I know it's a lot of information, and I know This is just very, if you're not new to embroidery, you know all of this. This is just the very basic stuff that I couldn't find online when I was getting started. It was, they all assumed that I already knew how to hoop it and that I already knew how to find the center and that I already knew how to orient the design where I want it. It's going to be very hard to do any specific machine tutorials because everybody's machine is different. Your menus are going to be different, but they all have the basic same functions. Some have added editorial functions, some has more than others, but all of them are going to give you that ability to center your design, to center your needle, to move things left or right. Most embroidery machines, if not all, come with at least some designs. Some will have more than others. And like this butterfly, this was just a design that came with my machine. And then you can always buy your own embroidery files from, there are so many. You can find them all over Etsy. You can find them just searching embroidery designs. There are just tons and tons and tons of really great digitizers. So thanks so much for watching. I hope this helped, and I hope to see a lot of you posting your embroidery projects in the Craft Crazy group and the sewing group. I would love to see them, and if you have any questions, I'm happy to help you if I can. Now, I want to start with a disclaimer and tell you I am by far not an embroidery expert. I've had my machine for about a year and a half or so, but what I found when I was starting out was that there was a lot of basic things that the embroidery tutorials that I was watching left out. And so I've kind of figured them out on my own, but I just wanted to give you the very basics. If you are brand new to embroidery or you have had a machine and you haven't you've been too intimidated to try it, I just want to give you those few tips and tricks so that you can be successful. And there are so many embroidery YouTube videos out there that can take you to the next step. But I just wanted to give you a few pointers to get started, just so that you are no longer afraid of your machine, and then you'll start getting into the bigger projects. Now, the first question I know you're going to ask me is, which embroidery machine do I have and which embroidery machine should I buy? I have a Janome Memory Craft 500E. It's a great machine. I love it. I did a lot of research before I purchased a machine. And the number one thing I can tell you is that you want to buy a machine with the largest hoop size, which fits within your budget. So I was very tempted to buy just an introductory machine. I think it had a 4x4 frame. That was all that you could stitch out, nothing larger than 4 inches by 4 inches. And I was very tempted to buy that just to see if I would use it. And then I thought, well, if I spend that money and I decide I like it, then that money is going to be wasted, and I'm going to have to do something with that machine and then go on to another one. So try to get a machine with the biggest hoop size that fits within your budget. I would recommend personally never buying a machine without at least a 5x7 frame. If you're only going to have a 4x4 frame, I think you're going to regret it and you'll be quickly upgrading. Initially, when I thought about my embroidery, I thought, well, what am I really going to embroider that's bigger than 4x4? I just can't see myself doing that. And now I rarely embroider anything that's smaller than 4x4. So just keep that in mind. Get the largest hoop size that you can get. Now, these are the hoops that come with my machine. Mine came with 4. Sometimes they come with 2. Sometimes they come with less. Sometimes you can buy accessory hoops. But my smallest frame is 5.5 by 5.5, and I have 5.5 by 7.9, and I have 7.9 by 7.9, and then my largest hoop is 11 by 7.9. So this is a pretty large hoop. So again, the only embroidery machine I've had is the Janome Memory Craft, so I can't really recommend other machines. I do hear great things about Brother embroidery machines. There are machines that are combination sewing and embroidery. That's another way to go. I personally didn't want to tie up my sewing machine while something's stitching out, so I chose to go with a standalone embroidery machine. But there are combo machines available, and there are standalone machine available. There's multi-needles. Mine's just a single needle. I'll show it to you here in a minute when we get into the machine. So it really depends on your personal needs, your personal budget, and what exactly you think you're going to be stitching, if you're going to be doing it for a business, etc., etc. Another thing to consider when you get an embroidery machine, which is something I didn't really realize until after I had my machine, is that you have to pretty much purchase additional software. Now, some machines will come with just a basic software package that lets you do, maybe flip it around or change it. But when you buy an embroidery file, you're going to buy it for it's going to come in one size. So if you buy a 4x4 embroidery file, a 4x4 design, you can't just take that 4x4 design and make it 10x10. You can't just stretch it. You can't just redo it. Now, if you have additional software, some of those software packages will allow you to do that. But embroidery software can be very pricey. I personally use Embrilliance. It's not one of the cheaper ones. It is very user-friendly, and it has a ton of things that I can do. I can resize files without any problem. I can work with fonts easily, etc. So you're going to want to do some research about your machine, what software it comes with, and what software you might want to purchase if that software doesn't do what you need it to do. My machine personally, I really didn't get any software with it. I can do a lot within my machine without going to any software. There's a lot of designs built into my machine. That's another thing you want to think about. I can move things around. I can flip them. I can, duplicate them, all of that within the machine. But if you want to make your own files, you want to buy fonts, embroidery fonts, you want to, maybe buy a design from a digital designer or a digitizer, and you want to customize it by adding a name into the design, etc., you're going to need an outside software to do that. So that's something else to look at. I didn't really realize that when I bought my machine that I wasn't going to be able to just immediately create my own designs and throw them into the machine and that was going to be it. There's a lot more to it. That's another thing. Some softwares will let you import vector files or like SVGs. Some files will let you, or some software will let you create your, do the drawings. Some software just lets you manipulate the file, again, stretch it, do the kind of stuff that you can do on the machine, but do it on your computer screen. So another thing to consider when you're looking at software, and I hope I'm not going too fast, this will all make more sense in a minute. But that's another thing. When you start buying embroidery files, something that you need to realize is, again, if you buy a 1/4 inch font, it only makes 1/4 inch letters. If you want it in also 4 inch, you might have to also buy that file, the 4 inch file, if it's not included. Now, some designers give you like 1/2 inch, 1 inch, 1.5 inch, 3 inch, all in one file. But just know that you can't just buy one font, and if you're used to like the Cricut Design Space software or Photoshop or Illustrator, you can't just buy a font and then stretch it. Now, Embroidery software will let me make a word. I can type my name and then I can stretch it and it will redigitize all the stitches for me. But not all software is going to do that. So keep in mind that when you buy fonts, when you buy designs, that you can't buy it in one size and think that's going to fit all unless you have the software to manipulate it. Now, on board, at least on my machine, and I think on most machines, I can resize things bigger or smaller by 20%, and that's it. So it doesn't make a big difference, but I can make something slightly bigger or smaller without going to any software, but that's it, only by 20% either way, either 20% bigger or 20% smaller. So keep that in mind. The other thing you need to keep in mind is that when you buy embroidery files, make sure that they include the file type for your specific machine. Different machines take different types of embroidery files. So I have a Janome. My machine takes files ending in .jef. If you have a brother machine, I believe it's .pes. So each machine, each brand has their own type of embroidery file. So you want to make sure that that is included. And that's the only file you're going to need when you download. You don't need to download, for instance, if you have a brother machine, you don't need to download that .jef file. So that's going to save you a lot of space because most digitizers include all the different file types. So when you click the download, you're going to get all of them. You can get rid of all of the ones except for what you need for your machine.
That's really all I have. I just hope that this video was helpful to you, that it makes you a little less afraid to try embroidery if you already have a machine or if you've been thinking about getting one. It gives you a little bit more information about what you need to look for and what you might need to go along with it, and just gives you a little bit more insight about embroidery and how to get started. I will link my Craft Crazy Facebook group as well as my sewing group. We do talk about embroidery in both of those groups quite a bit. And you are welcome to ask. There are many more seasoned embroiderers than myself in those groups that can answer any advanced questions that you have, or I'm happy to help you if I can answer any questions with my experience. And thanks so much for watching. Till next time, never stop making.